The concept of an evil entity or entities who are trying to cause people to do bad things is a concept that is probably as old as human history. Some people believe the devil is a universal force, instead of a being who is the archenemy of God who tempts people to sin. But the overwhelming consensus in near-death experience research is that Satan as a being does not exist. However, there is many that do believe the devil is real. In this list we count down 5 people who supposedly encountered the devil. I'm not saying that any of these cases proves that the devil exists. I'm going to leave that for you to decide. Michael Scott was a Scottish mathematician and scholar in the Middle Ages. Scott was born around 1175, probably in the Scottish border country. He is supposed to have studied at Oxford and Paris. He was in Italy by 1223, where he may have taught at Salerno. In Italy he came to the attention of Emperor Frederick II, who summoned Scott to become his court astrologer. Frederick had an ambitious reputation of his own. Besides all that ruling, he surrounded himself with intellectuals studying everything from theology to navigation, and he loved to oversee disputations among them. He was a noted intellectual in his own right, able to speak at least 6 languages and the author of the most famous medieval text on falconry. His enemies thought he was in league with the devil. He was certainly very interested in astrology and other occult arts, so Michael Scott's reputation for devilry may in part be derived from his close association with Frederick. It was said that Scott was the head of a group of demonic familiars that he had dispatched every night to one of the courts that he had visited in his travels. The demons would fetch him the finest international delicacies and fly them back. His own transportation was also pretty demonic. In about 1230, Scott left Frederick's service. What he did thereafter and when he died are complete mysteries, but in Scotland they insist that he retired and came home to the border country, and many stories are told about his feats. He is supposed to have turned a coven of witches to stone, resulting in the stone circle known as Long Meg and her daughters. He used a magic staff to change the course of the River Tweed. He entertained his dinner guests by having his familiar spirits steal dishes from the tables of the kings of France and Spain. He rode a black steed that had crossed to France and back in a single night. He drove off attacking pirates by summoning a great storm. What might be the most ambitious legend about Scott was that he conned the devil into helping him build a road. His father was granted some land and went on to build what is now the castle of Belwary, but what the castle really needed was a road. Scott summoned demons and the devil himself to build the road. He foresaw that he would die after being struck on the head by a rock, so he always wore an iron cap, but one day he took it off on entering a church, and a stone fell and struck his head, killing him. Johannes Kepler is one of the world's most famous astronomers. A planet, NASA mission and planet-hunting spacecraft are named after him. Caught up in the witch hunt which swept Europe in the 16th and 17th centuries, around 50,000 people are estimated to have been executed as witches between 1500 and 1700. The widowed Katharina Kepler was first accused by neighbours in her hometown in 1615, when she was 68. The accusations against Kepler claim that she had killed livestock and children. The most bizarre claim was that Kepler had searched among the villagers for someone to willingly help her not only dig up her father's body, but remove his skull so she could turn it into a drinking cup. People suspected that it was something to be used only in demonic rituals. Her trial lasted 6 years, and it wasn't until 1620 that Johannes Kepler stepped in to argue his mother's case. Moving his entire family to Germany, he focused on explaining the so-called evidence that had been aimed at his mother, and ultimately she was released. Her other 2 children had distanced themselves from the whole thing. One son even insisted that the trial be moved farther away to another town, because it was making him look bad. Katharina Kepler died 6 months after being given her freedom. John Dee was an eminent Elizabethan mathematician and astrologer. His studies into the occult took him abroad on many occasions, and this has added weight to the suspicion that he was also a secret government agent. Through his life, John Dee held some lofty posts. He was the royal astrologer for Queen Mary. At the same time though, he dabbed in the occult, and these experiments saw him in prison for heresy in 1555. Upon release he went travelling in Europe allegedly to spy for the Queen, but on return to England Dee found his home was ruined. It was attacked by people who had heard of his occult research, and petitioned Elizabeth for help. The rumours around Dee meant the Queen could only do so much for him, and while he wanted to move to Winchester, she requested that the Archbishop of Canterbury offer him a post as warden of the Manchester Collegiate Church. Dee took up the offer and moved north in 1596. He began his experiments in trying to contact discarnate entities in 1581, mainly fueled by strange dreams, feelings and mysterious noises within his home. On the 25th of May 1582, he recorded that he'd made his first contact with the spirit world, through the medium of his crystal ball. This had taken Dee years of work to achieve. Despite his work with the occult, Dee was a deeply religious man and on his arrival involved himself with church life. However, the rumours that had caused him to move to Manchester followed him to the city. This burn mark on a table is said to have been made by the Devil's Hoof. Dee lived in Chettam School, home to the priests of the church, and a table from Dee's time still exists there in the audit room. It bears evidence of a story which blew up around Dee. Upon it is a circular burn mark, a mark which it said was made by the hoof of Satan after Dee summoned him to seek advice and wisdom. Whatever the truth of the story, the stain on Dee's character, like the mark on the table, was immovable. Eleanor Coggan, Duchess of Gloucester, was accused of trying to assassinate King Henry VI using witchcraft, a crime for which she received life imprisonment, and perhaps left a ghostly legacy. Eleanor Coggan was the ambitious second wife of Duke Humphrey Plantagenet of Gloucester. Eleanor had been the lady-in-waiting for Humphrey's first wife Jacqueline of Holland, and it's suspected that they had a relationship together before his first wife passed away. Eleanor bore Humphrey 2 children. The Duchess of Gloucester, an astrologer named Roger Bolingbroke, Marjorie Jourdamain, a priest named John Hume, and Thomas Southwell were all accused of meeting in secret to perform the black arts with the aid of a wax image of the king, which they used with magic in order to cause the death of the king. Apparently, John Hume lost his nerve and informed on the secret group, some of whom were promptly arrested. It wasn't long until Bolingbroke made a public admission and confessed that he'd been dealing with the devil to further their plans, and it was all at Eleanor's urging. Marjorie Jourdamain, sometimes referred to as the Witch of Eye, was also arrested for a construction of a wax image of the king, who was the recipient of their spells. A violent storm that kicked up on the night of her arrest seemed to cement the belief that she was in league with the devil. Marjorie claimed that the wax image was meant as a fertility charm. Marjorie was burned at the stake for her dealings with the devil and for witchcraft. About the same time, Southwell died a mysterious death in prison, and Bolingbroke was hanged, drawn and quartered. Hume was pardoned, and Eleanor was burned by sentencing of a court led by the Archbishop of Canterbury. The year was 1974, the place a small town called Ossett in Yorkshire, England. The ordinary Ossett people had no idea that soon the eyes of the world would fall on their community. Something sinister and truly evil was brewing in their town. By the time the first week in October was over, a sickening crime would have been committed, a crime that would begin with the possession of Michael Taylor. At 9:45 AM on the 6th of October 1974, West Yorkshire Police received a phone call. A man had been wandering naked through the streets of Ossett, covered in red paint. Uncertain as to whether or not it was a hoax, PC Alan Walker was sent out to investigate. Arriving at the scene, the officer discovered a naked man curled in the fetal position, and covered not in red paint, but in blood. As the officer approached him, the man began to scream, "It's the blood of Satan, it's the blood of Satan." What greeted the police officer at the home of Michael Taylor was a scene of appalling depravity. Mrs. Christine Taylor, the wife of Michael, and her small pet dog lay dead. Both had been murdered in the most shocking and gruesome way. Whoever had committed the crime was clearly deranged and evil. The exorcism of Michael Taylor was hastily organised. 2 ministers were asked to perform the ritual. At midnight on Saturday, the 5th of October 1974, the exorcism began. For the next 7 hours, Taylor was put through unimaginable horrors. As soon as the exorcism began, he started to spit, scream, bite and scratch. Eventually, he was tied to the church floor to prevent him from attacking the 2 priests. Despite this, he continued to have convulsions while he was doused in holy water, and crucifixes placed upon his body. Over 40 demons were identified as inhabiting Taylor's soul. By daybreak, everybody involved was exhausted. The exorcism had only been partially successful. Despite this failure, the decision was taken to allow Michael to go home, and the exorcism would be completed the following night. Before he left the church, the two exorcists warned Taylor that 3 demons still stubbornly occupied his soul: insanity, anger, and murder. Within 2 hours, Michael Taylor had arrived home and slaughtered his wife and dog. At his trial in March, Taylor was acquitted on the grounds of insanity. So that was 5 people who supposedly encountered the devil. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more countdown videos.